Thank you for watching this video from the Center for European Studies at Carleton University. This event was organized by the Center for European Studies and Canada-Europe Transatlantic Dialogue, and supported by Carleton University and by grants from the European Union and Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada. The views expressed in this video are solely those of the presenter and do not reflect the views of the European Union, Center for European Studies, and Carleton University.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this panel. As I was invited to speak here, I wanted to speak about the background of community energy and particularly what Ontario is doing. It was referred to by the earlier presenters. And then I'll give a case study or a specific example of the Ottawa Renewable Energy Co-op. So what is OREC, as we call it? It's a renewable energy co-op, which is a unique type of cooperative to Ontario. We've been around for 5 years now. And we were formed as a way for residents of Eastern Ontario to collectively own and operate renewable energy generating assets in this city or in this region. As we know, the renewable energy transition is taking place. It's inevitable and hopefully will happen faster or sooner than later. But we would like the residents of the region in which that transition is happening to take part and be part of that democratic process in which that build out is happening, as well as to benefit financially from it. So Milestones to date, our current membership is about 450 residents of Eastern Ontario. That's individuals, not corporations. We were the first renewable energy co-op in the province to have our share offering approved by the regulator. The renewable energy co-op definition is a new thing to this province since 2009. And so there was a sort of flood of new co-ops forming at that time, and we were the first one at the time to get our offering approved, which we felt was a good sign for the simplicity and straightforward approach that we were taking to business. Since then, that first offering was in 2012. It brought in just under $1 million to invest in renewable energy assets in Ottawa. So we felt like that was a very strong signal from the marketplace that there's interest for this type of security, for this type of investment vehicle. Since then, we've done 3 other offerings, closing at just over $1 million each, 1.25 and 1.34. Our current offering is open still, closing at the end of October. We're seeking $1.7 million for that. With that money, we've invested, so it's totaling about $5 million in assets. We've invested in 13 solar rooftop projects around the city. I'll show you some pictures of those in a minute, but we have some on schools, some nonprofit housing, some businesses, barns, and warehouses. So why community power? We call this collective ownership of renewable energy community power. It's a concept that really has been demonstrated by Germany and Denmark for years, for actually a century or so before we got into this whole sector in Ontario. But why do we consider that to be a benefit? Centralized energy systems is the typical approach. It's the conventional approach. Large generating stations on the shores of the Great Lakes here in Ontario that ship power out through large transmission lines to various consumers around the province. There's a vulnerability to that. There's also a challenge from an efficiency point of view. There's losses in transmission. On average, those losses for long-distance transmission are about 10 to 11% across the province. At peak times, it can be upwards of 30 or 40%. When we're trying to shove more electrons through those lines on hot summer days, we lose more through heat as well as through the noise that we hear coming off those power lines. So there's an efficiency benefit to producing power in this urban centers where we consume it. Also, there's a vulnerability element that we saw in 2003 when there was the brownout. We saw that because of long-distance transmission, because of the dependency on that fragile grid system, there's a vulnerability from the province as a whole in having that sort of centralized system of distribution. And then psychologically, it's also an out of sight, out of mind sort of vulnerability there, that we don't think about the impact of our electricity consumption if we don't see the generation. The alternative to that is a distributed generation alternative. So that's a distributed geographically across the province. And that can also allow smaller projects that then can be owned by the communities in which they're located. That enables, and renewable energy is a great technology for that because it inherently can be more dispersed, it inherently can be smaller and more piecemeal, and therefore financially more available to different ownership structures. Also, because of that community ownership model, we overcome some of the challenges of community acceptance. Having that social license to operate is easier when you get people involved in the governance side as well as the financial benefit side. And we don't see that so much in the solar sector, but we do see that primarily in the wind sector and sometimes microhydro, sometimes biogas as well. The more people are involved in the decision making, the less afraid of the change they are. The more they're involved in the financial benefit, the less that noise of that wind turbine is a problem. The more they think of that as money in the bank. I guess one other benefit is that many of these renewable energy assets are available in rural areas, and so it can be a form of rural economic development as well. In Ontario, what have we done? Since the 1990s, that's when we really started thinking about energy from a political discourse or in a public discourse point of view. That was primarily instigated by the concern for the health impacts of coal power. There was quite a backlash around that. There was political cohesion on all sides of the political spectrum that we needed to get off of coal. That was in the 90s. Then we had the blackout in the 2003. We committed to phasing out coal at that point. There was more community awareness of electricity in general. We also, in 2009, then had an energy minister, Minister Smitherman, who was quite committed to being a leader in the green energy sector. He brought in the first Green Energy Act at that point, which introduced the feed-in tariff as well as the Community Power Fund, some benefits around community ownership. We also invested in grid upgrades at that point and had this domestic content rule that enabled a local manufacturing sector. I'll jump ahead. In 2015, as we are today, we've seen that our targets for renewable energy generation have been met ahead of schedule. We had 2018 targets that will be met by the end of this year or next year. We've also seen, because of that community ownership priority, we've seen tens of thousands of members join community renewable energy co-ops around the province. We've seen those co-ops raise over $30 million in assets and invest in 30 megawatts of power assets across the province. The feed-in tariff program sets a guaranteed rate per kilowatt hour based on the cost of production for any particular type of renewable energy generation program or generation technology. And that's been a model or a policy mechanism that's been found to be the most efficient at increasing the renewable energy build-out in the most cost-effective way. There are over 150 countries around the world that now have renewable energy or feed-in tariff policies. Ontario is the first in Canada to really adopt a comprehensive strategy around this policy, a comprehensive feed-in tariff policy modeled after the German mechanism. So thank you very much for your leadership on that. It was introduced in 2009, as I mentioned. Over 50,000 homeowners across the province have installed microfits, as we saw from Councillor Chernyshenko's photo. There's 50,000 of those across the province. A really interesting stat that I like to share is that 1 in 7 farmers has installed a solar project on their farm, or either on the ground or on the roof, because farmers understand the concept of harnessing solar. Interestingly enough, this program has been 90% plus solar projects. It's been a policy that does include all the different types of renewable technologies, but 90+% of the projects have come in under solar. And so I'd be interested to have a dialogue with our European counterparts about how they've enabled a broader spectrum of different types of technologies and whether or not that solar focus is a good or bad thing from a policy point of view. It should be noted, these are all smaller projects. So solar is a smaller technology inherently versus other types of technologies. And so the larger technologies or the larger installations are dealt with through a separate policy mechanism right now. And there are wind and microhydro and biogas projects being installed across the province. Our feed-in tariff program right now really talks about 500 kilowatts and less, which is my hypothesis why it's really a solar program right now. So why solar? Why is it good for Ontario? A few reasons. In Ontario, we consume the most power on those peak days in the summertime for air conditioning. Our heating is primarily natural gas. Our air conditioning is primarily electric. So that's our peak power consumption, which means that solar actually matches quite well with that peak power time. And that's the time when the electricity imports are the most expensive, of course. It also was the feed-in tariff program was seen as a way to reinvigorate our manufacturing sector. In 2008, we had a bottoming out of our auto manufacturing sector. 2009, we saw a reinvigoration of some of those facilities to now be producing solar and wind components. So blades, rotors, wiring, racking, and inverters and panels. So we've seen about 26 of those facilities now popping up around the province to create these types of technologies. And we've become a leader in that export market as well as the domestic market. Clean energy, it's clean. There's no emissions from these types of technologies. That's a bonus when we are comparing that to the coal scenario that we spoke about earlier. Stabilizing rates. So the feed-in tariff program sets guaranteed rates for 20 years, and that helps us predict our energy costs into the future, which businesses actually say is inherently better for them than having variable. If it's slightly higher today, but they know it will be fixed for the next 20 years, that helps them in their modeling more than having a cheaper price today would in many cases. And then transmission losses we talked about before as well. Generating power in the urban centers helps us reduce our transmission losses. Impact investing is another sort of sector that we're talking, or concept that we're involved in as a renewable energy co-op. Because we're a mechanism for people to use their investment portfolios as a tool for change, to leave a legacy with their investment portfolio. We branch into that sector of impact investing. So impact investing is something that is more and more popular in the investing world, more and more spoken about. Impact or ethical investing or socially responsible investing, all kind of taglines for the same concept with different, slightly different tweaks. There's now over 50 billion in assets that are impact invested, and the growth potential is seen to be about 500 billion. We're seeing from this bar chart on the bottom, you can see the most popular theme for impact investing is climate change, and we think renewable energy is a very key element of that. What is the value proposition, therefore, that we offer to our members when they think about investing in OREC? We're targeting dividends of 5%. We support all that money, that $5 million of assets that we've raised so far goes back into the local economy. We create local jobs, we hire local folks to build our projects. That builds local resilience. It also supports climate change mitigation. It's a small piece of the pie, but a piece of the pie nonetheless towards the direction that we need to be headed. It's local ownership. Many of our members and investors are parents, and they like to have local tangible examples that they can show to their children and demonstrate what's possible for their future. Here's some pictures of our projects. We have some on some flat roofs. The two flat roof ones there are high schools that we have projects on. Saint-Miogenet, Franco-Cité, Franco-Ouest, and Maurice-Lapointe are the 4 high schools, if you're from this area, that we have some projects on. You also can see that the one on the top left there is our largest project at that time. It's on a warehouse out in the West End, and it's a collaborative project with Windmill Development, who's a local green builder in this region. We had Mayor Watson at the bottom right there announcing that our Maurice-Lapointe school project was the 1,000th solar rooftop in Ottawa just a few weeks ago. Why cooperatives? The co-op difference. Cooperatives adhere to 7 value principles. Most people think of co-ops, they think of one member, one vote. That's number 3, the democratic control piece, that everyone gets the same vote regardless of how much they've invested in the co-op. But co-ops also adhere to 6 other value principles that make them similar to in the similar sort of strain of benefit corporations. They have to be giving back to community in some way. They have to be giving education opportunities back to the community. They cannot be discriminatory in their membership or their financial investment, and they cannot be bought out. And they adhere to cooperating with other co-ops. So for us, that means that we have projects on some housing co-ops. We bank with a co-op. We have insurance from a co-op. So that's how we sort of adhere to that number 5. Co-ops also tend to survive twice as long as other similar types of businesses in their same sector, because people are involved in them for other reasons than just financial returns. They're involved from an ethical point of view. They're involved from a democratic and social and environmental benefit point of view. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we have an offering that's open until the end of October. It's 1 month left, folks. If you're from Ottawa or Eastern Ontario, please do, and you're interested, please don't forget about this option. 2 minutes left, not a problem. The interesting thing that we've brought in is that we have our Rsp and Tfsa eligibility for our shares. So that's a nice piece for people to think about, money that they would otherwise be setting aside for 20 years that can be put into something local, green, and renewable in this region. Our minimum investment is $2,500. We're working to bring that. We've brought that down from $5,000, so it's more accessible to a wider population. We are targeting a 5% dividend, 3% guaranteed return on member investment notes, which is a 5-year bond, sort of term deposit option. And the payout structures are like this for the preference shares, but you can talk to me if you want more information on that. The way that we think about that is for members who are thinking about this as an element of their portfolio. So this is a way to mitigate risk is to think about, we need to be getting off of fossil fuel assets. We see that fossil fuels in our portfolios are inherently a risky thing at this point because of the fluctuation as well as the low prices of oil right now. And so these types of renewable energy investments are helping to shield that vulnerability, that fuel escalation or that fuel variability piece. Also in Ontario, because of the guaranteed 20-year power purchase agreements under the feed-in tariff program, it helps give us a security of our business model. It helps give us a platform upon which we can project this is where we'll be in 20 years, and we have a guaranteed buyer and a guaranteed price for our product. That's my contact information. I'll be around.
Thank you.
Thank you.